Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Today we're talking about follow-up and why I think it's maybe a bit of an overrated skill. Okay, so a couple weeks ago I made a video about the Magic Fox, and my recommended build for the Magic Fox with 8 slots. And I ended up recommending, hey, don't go with follow-up in this pet. That was a fairly, I would say, controversial suggestion. A lot of people said, hey, follow-up's been doing great. Other people have said it's been awesome. Could you test, follow-up on this pet against a similar pet without follow-up and see what does better? Well, I mean, testing this directly is a bit tricky, right? Because I would need to get a pet with, at least similar stats and, build on it, same skill levels and then test them out, right? You control for the heroes pretty easily. Obviously, you control for the artifacts pretty easily, but the pet's pretty difficult because all the the stats and the slots are tough to do, and you have to build up the skill levels. And you can't just swap skills on and off the pet. Obviously, that is very cost prohibitive. So you could get as close as you could, but the problem with that, I think that really kind of doesn't understand how the follow up skill works. All right, and so let's look at some examples here and we'll start with just generic follow-up. And the first thing we'll do here is just show you what follow-up looks normally. I'm using a very vanilla setup here, nothing complicated. Lily Valen with a Sapphire Phaedrake. It is a strong Sapphire Phaedrake, but other than that, nothing complicated about it. You can see follow-up here, it's got a base 40% chance cast rate, but because I've advanced follow-up, it's an Amber skill, so it's always going to be 3 stars and a very high luck. I literally have a 99.99% chance of casting follow-up every turn, so virtual certainty every turn. So let's just take a look here, and I'm going to use Garwood and Hosk here just to hold it in place, so it's as clear as it can be. All right, so the takeaway there is for follow-up to do good on this pet, you have to be in combat a long time. And the test, it was about 17 seconds, all right? Sometimes I think, people think combat looks like this. All right, is that how your combat normally goes? Or is it something more like this? Okay, and that's not even a big engagement. Now, look, to be fair, sometimes you are sitting back and getting a lot of rage cycles off. Like if you're sitting back with your mages and just hitting the tanks, a lot of times you will get a lot of rage cycles off that way. There is another scenario when you get a lot of rage cycles off. If you're the in a rally or a garrison, you're gonna get the full rage cycle off a lot of times to include follow up. Now, look, these guys, they should never be your garrison. But sometimes they can be their rally. This rally is actually really good if you can stop it from being swarmed. So if you're the rally leader or one of the mage rally leaders from your alliance, follow up is a much stronger choice. Okay, and the last thing, of course, is that keeps are a thing. You can put the mages in keeps and they'll do a lot of damage. These two in a keep, they can wreck. follow-up's great to keep. So that's all true, right? But to the extent you're open fielding, follow-up is going to substantially underperform what the pet calculators, what the test simulators will tell you, because combat doesn't work like that in the open field. With mages, you're moving back and forth a lot, and you're not getting that full extended rage cycle off all the time. Incidentally, this is one of the reasons why sand lizards are really good, because sand lizards go off at the start of combat, provided you have that 6-second cooldown. Whereas all the damage pets, they don't go off until, 15, 17 seconds in combat, something like that. Okay, so when I'm talking about follow-up on the Magic Fox, I'm mostly talking about using it with Varden and, Cantaman here, the G5 mage heroes. The Magic Fox itself, it only requires that your heroes do debuffs via their innate skills. And there are other magic heroes that do it. In particular, Alwyn is actually kind of interesting with the Magic Fox. The problem with Alwyn is not that the Magic Fox doesn't work with him, it's that Alwyn, isn't very good. But if Alwyn ever gets the paid upgrade like Selûne does, like Mu does, maybe we'll use the Magic Fox with him. But for the purposes of this video, I'm really talking about using the Magic Fox with the G5 magic heroes. Okay, so everything I've been talking about so far is true about follow-up generically, but there are two reasons in particular the Magic Fox, specifically the Magic Fox when you're talking about the G5 heroes, makes follow-up a less good choice than it is on other pets. The first reason is the way the Magic Fox works is it gets a little stack of Phantasm Mark every time your Legion inflicts a debuff versus one of their innate skills. And then when the Magic Fox does its talent skill, it does extra damage, actually ignores defense, but the effect is extra damage based on the number of stacks of Phantasm Mark you get, okay? Now, the downside to that is when the Magic Fox does its skill, it clears all these little stacks of Phantasm Mark off, okay? The way the G5, heroes work is you're going to get max stacks of Phantasm Mark. You're going to get those 5 stacks when, Varden does his rage skill. And then when the Warp Head does its talent skill, it's going to clear those marks, which means the follow-up cast is going to have no marks on it, okay? The good news is the talent skill with the G5 heroes is always going to go off at 5 stacks. The bad news is that means the follow-up cast will always do substantially less damage than the primary cast. Okay, the second issue is that Intense Foxfire, this is the pet shop skill, this is going to give your pet a secondary damage source anytime you inflict Phantasm Mark. And remember, that's basically anytime your hero does their rage kill 5 times per cycle through the rage kill, right? So this hits 5 times every round of combat. The downside to Intense Foxfire is this is a big chunk of the Magic Fox's damage, but follow-up doesn't capture any of this, right? Follow-up only benefits Foxfire, it doesn't capture any of the Intense Foxfire, and so the follow-up in the Magic Fox is weaker because it's only capturing half of your damage. Okay, at this point you might be saying, okay, you're trying to prove that follow-up isn't as good on this pet as it is on other pets, but what's the downside? The downside to follow-up on the Magic Fox is there's a significant opportunity cost to putting follow-up on there, all right? And the biggest opportunity cost is you have 3 intelligence slots and you have 4 skills competing for it, right? Obviously, you're going to have the talent skill. That means you have Advanced Foxfire, Follow-Up, and Elemental Harmony competing for those 2 slots, like 3 skills for 2 slots. Because the Follow-Up is not benefiting Intense Foxfire, and Elemental Harmony does benefit Intense Foxfire, that is a reason why I prefer Elemental Harmony on this pet, right? Elemental Harmony benefits not only the talent skill, but also the additional, Intense Foxfire skill, which is a reason why on this pet, I think follow-up is the wrong option. Okay, so let's put it all together. I'm going to show you my math because, people in every comment section will tell you that I'm wrong. So I'm going to show you the proof of how this is working. The first round of combat I'm going to show you is a Magic Fox that I've built for testing that has the follow-up skill on it. And I'll show you the combat logs at the end here to sort of, demonstrate the things that I've been talking about. The second round of combat that we'll go through here is the Magic Fox that I'm using, and we'll slow it down and show you exactly how things are working as the combat evolves. Okay, so the part you've all been waiting for, some very exciting combat logs. The first one we're going to look at here is the war pet that does have follow-up, just to show you that war pet pretty underdeveloped, right? Just for testing purposes, 0-star talent skill, 0-star follow-up, but just to see how the mechanics work. And the idea here is, I had to get lucky here because the base follow-up cast chest is only 40%. So thankfully, this one, it went off on the first rage skill. All right, so let's look at the battle log here. We'll go down to turn 10 here. Some interesting things happen here. This is when Varden does his rage skill, and you'll see here that I get 5 stacks on Phantasm Mark. I do not love the wording here because it says for the duration of the battle. What it should say is like there's no time limit to this. You get it as long as you're in combat, but as soon as the Magic Fox casts Foxfire, like the actual damage effect, it'll clear these stacks, right? So it is not time limited, but it will be cleared by the first cast of Magic Fox. Okay, the only other thing about this is you'll see we have the artifact symbol here. I have the bracers. There's a passive effect. It got triggered this turn, but not particularly relevant for this video. Okay, turn 12 is when Canceman costs his skill. Not anything particularly interesting here. The Magic Fox is trying to get more stacks here, but it's already reached maximum possible stacks, so we really couldn't do anything about it. Okay, so then we go down to turn 14. This is the main cast of Foxfire. It's going off at this point, and it, even at 0 stars, it's dealing 2,800 damage to a Darkling, to be fair, but still not bad. And you can see I triggered follow-up, which goes off 2 seconds later, turn 16 here. And the follow-up cast is 0 stars, but does very little damage, not getting the benefit of the Phantasm Marks because none have been gained since turn 14. And finally, we'll look at turn 19 here. This is Varden's, his second rage skill. And you can see he's gained all the stacks of Phantasm Mark again. So basically, you're going to get the Phantasm Marks full stacks anytime the Magic Fox casts its primary skill, but never when it casts its secondary skill. All right, so and here's the combat log with the Magic Fox that does not have follow-up. We'll just take a look at this one. Still needs some development, but, getting there. Obviously much stronger than my testing pet. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Once again, turn 10 is when I trigger the first rage skill. I get full benefits here. And you can see in addition to this, I hit the target with Intense Foxfire 5 times on turn 10. Okay, that's going to be important. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But you are doing damage with the pet when the first rage skill goes off. Okay, turn 12, it's kind of the same story. The Magic Fox is trying to do stuff, but it's already had the maximum possible stacks, so no big deal. And then we go to turn 14. This is when it's clearing all its stacks and doing damage to the target, okay? And then nothing again happens until turn 20, which then we get the cycle all over again. Now, you might notice, hey, like there's a little bit of difference in the timing. The first one's turn 19, turn 20. Hey, that's just random chance. These things are going to go off roughly the same time, but any given combat, you're going to get the rolls, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. That's why that is. Okay, earlier I went through this whole diatribe about how combat doesn't work the way the combat simulator thinks it works. You're moving back and forth. Why is that important? It's important for 2 reasons. The first is if you have a follow-up cast, it is literally the last thing to go off. In a standard combat, it's going to go off either on turn 16 or turn 17, something like that. There's going to be lots of combat when you get some of your other rage skills off, but you don't get the follow-up cast off. That's why that's important. The other thing that's important is that Intense Foxfire, it goes off on turn 10, turn 9, turn 11, something like that, typically around turn 10. There are going to be combats where you get to the first rage skill, but you don't get to the follow-up cast, which means the Intense Foxfire goes off, but follow-up doesn't. Well, you could have both, but I'd rather have a skill that's benefiting Intense Foxfire instead of crippling the damage on Intense Foxfire to get a follow-up cast that I'm going to get less often. All right, that is my rationale why I don't think Foxfire is good in this pet. Now, having said all that, follow-up's not bad, right? Follow-up is still a good skill. It will do damage. It's not like you're putting Counter-Strike or something on there. Follow-up is a valid skill. And like I mentioned before, there are additional use cases for follow-up in which it's going to perform relatively better than it will in the open field. In particular, if you're the rally lead for your alliance for mages, really strong there. I certainly like to put my mages in the keep, but on average, they do a lot more fighting in the open field than they do in a keep, which is why I've gone with this build for my Magic Fox. Anyway, that's all I got for you today, and until next time, you stay classy, Belleron.